She was asleep when her stepmother crept in with a pair of rusted scissors. Outside, the moonlight danced gently on the compound walls. Inside, the only sound was Amara's breathing, slow, peaceful. A thick strand of her hair, black, long, beautiful, dropped to the mat. Another, then another, until her head was a battlefield of broken pieces and cruel patches. Her stepmother, Madame Obi, stood over her, smiling. If I can't destroy her spirit, I'll destroy her beauty. Amara was the jewel of Umulechi, not just for her beauty, though even elders whispered that the gods had taken their time with her, but because of her spirit. She helped the blind woman cross the market road. She carried palm oil for the widow with shaky hands. And when children fought, it was always Amara who calmed them. She didn't speak much, but when she smiled, the whole village paused. Her mother had died when she was just 8. Her father, a quiet man of few words, remarried a year later. He brought home a woman named Madame Obi, sharp-tongued, smooth-faced, and too quick to smile. She came with her daughter, Adise, pretty, polite, and painfully aware she lived in Amara's shadow. At first, Obi acted sweet. She plaited Amara's hair, called her my dear. But behind her eyes, something watched. She saw how the villagers adored Amara, how even the palace guards lowered their heads when the girl passed. How Adise, no matter how many beads or bangles she wore, could never draw the same gaze. Soon the kindness faded, the soft touches turned cold, and small things began to go missing. Amara's scarf, her best slippers, even a necklace from her late mother. Each time she asked, Obi shrugged. Maybe if you kept your head out of the clouds, you wouldn't lose things. Then came the day the prince's messenger rode through the village square, and Obi's jealousy turned into something darker. Then came the news that would change everything. A royal gong echoed through the village square. A rider in white bearing the prince's seal read aloud by decree of His Highness, Prince Ikenna of Enugu. A grand festival shall be held to celebrate the next queen of the land. Every maiden of age is invited. The air crackled. Drums beat from the compound walls. Girls screamed with glee. Mothers rushed to pull out hidden wrappers, old jewelry, forgotten perfumes. The Tor's hut became a war zone. The beadmaker didn't sleep for 2 days. Even Adise, Madame Obi's daughter, smiled like someone had just handed her the throne. But it was Amara, quiet, soft-spoken Amara, who stepped into the sunlight that evening, and for once allowed herself to dream. She closed her eyes and imagined it. The palace lanterns floating in the wind like fireflies. The scent of jasmine and roasted plantain filling the air. The sound of flutes and her dancing. Not as a servant, not as a shadow, but as a girl who deserved to be seen. She didn't say a word to anyone. But that night, under her mat, she quietly unfolded a strip of gold cloth she had been saving for years. And across the compound, Obi saw her. And just like that, the seed of a new plan began to grow. But Madame Obi had been watching. She saw the way Amara's eyes lit up when she looked at the sky. The soft hum in her voice as she quietly stitched her cloth. That quiet joy, that silent dream made her sick. We'll see how long that glow lasts. The day before the festival, Obi called Amara into the yard. She handed her a scroll, a list so long it rolled across the floor like a python. Wash every wrapper in this compound twice. Clean the goat pen until it smells like rose water. Fetch water from the far stream. The near one is too muddy. Cook for the entire household, and not a single grain of rice must burn. And if I find even one speck of dust, you'll start again. Amara's heart sank, but she nodded and began. The sun rose, then boiled, then dipped into dusk. Her fingers bled from scrubbing, her arms burned from lifting, but she did not stop, and just as the sky turned orange, she placed the last plate of stew on the fire. She exhaled. Her legs wobbled. But in her heart, a tiny flicker of pride remained. She had done it. She had earned her chance. But across the compound, in the shadows by the doorway, Madame Obi stood, arms folded, eyes narrow. So she still believes she's going, she muttered. Then tonight, I'll teach her where she belongs. She walked to her room, opened a carved wooden box, and pulled out a pair of old iron scissors. Still sharp, the scream tore through the compound like thunder. It wasn't just loud. It was the kind that made goats run, made neighbors freeze mid-conversation, made birds lift into the sky and frantic flocks. Inside the room, Amara stood in front of the mirror, frozen. Her hands trembled as they reached for her head. The girl who once wore her hair like a waterfall of pride now stared at a massacre. It wasn't shaved. It wasn't styled. It was butchered. Hacked in all directions. Tufts here. Bald patches there. Some parts still held beads that clung desperately to the memory of beauty. Amara didn't scream again. She just blinked slowly, as if hoping the reflection would blink back something different. And then the door creaked open. Madame Obi leaned against the frame, arms folded, lips twisted in satisfaction. "What is it, Amara?" she said with mock sweetness. "You don't like your new look?" She stepped closer. "You said you wanted to go to the palace, Abby. Go on then. Let's see if the prince wants a girl who looks like a plucked chicken." Amara didn't reply. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She reached slowly for the scarf hanging by her bed, the one her mother had left behind. She wrapped it around her head, tying it with care, as if every knot was a prayer. Then she turned. She didn't even glance at Madame Obi. She opened the door, stepped into the sand with bare feet, and walked, shoulders straight, head high, toward the edge of the village. There was only one place left in the world that felt safe. Beyond the yam fields, past the whispering palm trees, stood a small clay hut wrapped in silence and smoke. It belonged to Mama and Kai, a woman so old that no one remembered when she arrived. Some said she spoke to trees. Others claimed she once healed a boy with no heartbeat. But everyone agreed on one thing. Her words could mend what the world had broken. Amara reached the door and fell to her knees. Her chest heaved, but her eyes held no more tears, only ashes. She took it, she croaked. "My hair, my pride, my chance." Mama and Ki opened the door without a word. She had already been waiting. Her eyes scanned the girl. Not her head, not her scarf, her soul. She reached out. Her fingers wrinkled like the bark of an old Ioko tree and pulled Amara inside. They sat together in the stillness. The fire crackled. The wind sang through the thatched roof. Then Mama Nichi spoke. "When the lioness walks into the forest, the trees do not ask about her mane. They part because they feel her power." She untied the scarf, ran her fingers gently over Amara's head, and smiled. "They tried to humble you with shame," she said. "But shame is afraid of women who rise." From a small calabash, she brought out palm oil, cowries, and thread. Together in silence, they braided what was left, tight, defiant rows that whispered strength with every curve. Shiwa in beads, not gold, but carved from bone and wood, ancient things that had passed through the hands of women who'd survived worse. When they finished, Mama and Kichi handed her a mirror. Amara looked into it, not to find beauty, but to see if anything remained of herself. And what she saw wasn't a victim. It was a fire, low and quiet, but ready to burn through anything that stood in its path. The palace pulsed with life that night. The air shimmered with perfume, candlelight, and the hum of royalty. Drummers played rhythms that made the marble floor vibrate. Laughter floated like smoke. And the grand hall sparkled with gold. And girls. They twirled in gowns stitched with foreign silk, hair piled high, sculpted like monuments dusted in gold, crowned with flowers from gardens no commoner could afford. And then the music shifted, not because it stopped, but because the room sensed something had changed. Amara stepped through the palace gates. No jewelry, no makeup, no shoes, just a flowing ash-colored dress. Sewn by her own hands and a crown of short beaded cornrows that caught the light like quiet thunder. Her feet kissed the floor with each step, not begging for acceptance but declaring, "I do not need your permission." Heads turned. Then came the whispers, sharp as blades. "Who let her in? She looks like a boy. She must be lost." Laughter, snickering, but Amara didn't blink. She walked like the marble was laid for her alone, like she'd walked through fire to get there and didn't burn. At the top of the grand staircase, Prince Ikena paused. His eyes had glazed over after the 50th girl twirled before him, dressed in lace and empty flattery. But now his gaze locked onto the barefoot girl in gray, and he straightened. There was no gold in her hair, no gemstone on her neck, but she moved like someone who'd fought shadows in silence, and walked away, holding her light. She didn't smile, she didn't bow. She just stood there unshaken. And in that stillness, the room shifted around her. From across the hall, a voice sweetened with venom sliced through the music. A noble girl in bright silk, eyes narrowed with envy, sneered loud enough for all to hear. Maybe she cut her hair because she wanted attention. Poor thing, so desperate to be seen. Laughter followed. Not the light kind, the cruel kind. The kind that stings like pepper in a wound. Amara stood still. Not stiff. Still. Her hands didn't flinch. Her eyes didn't drop. She simply breathed. And then a voice cut through the noise like thunder. I disagree. Silence. Utter silence. Heads turned like wind-blown grass. Even the drummers stopped mid-beat. At the top of the staircase stood Prince Iena, his eyes locked. Onto the girl with the scarf and fire in her bones. He stepped forward, each footstep echoing like a verdict. She is the most beautiful woman in this room, he said. Not because of her dress, not because of her hair, but because she walked in anyway. The room froze. No one dared to laugh now. Amara's chest rose and fell slowly. She didn't smile. She didn't blink away tears. She just met his eyes. Not as a subject, but as an equal. The music held its breath. Then the prince stepped forward. His palm opened toward her, steady and sure. May I have this dance? Amara didn't answer right away. She glanced sideways to the far end of the grand hall. There, half hidden behind a curtain of lace and royalty, stood Madame Obi, frozen, eyes wide, mouth ajar, a ghost witnessing the ruin of her own scheme. Their eyes met. No words passed. None were needed. Then Amara turned back to the prince, and for the first time that night she smiled. Yes, she said softly. Let's dance. She placed her hand in his, and as they stepped onto the floor, barefoot girl and royal son, the palace changed. Not the music, not the lights, but the air. It carried whispers, but not the ones from before. She's breathtaking. She walks like a queen. That's the girl with the short hair. But Amara didn't hear them. She danced, not like someone proving herself, but like someone who had already won. Weeks passed. The kingdom pulsed with rumor. And then the drums rolled. A royal decree echoed from the palace gates. By command of His Highness, Prince Ikenna of Enugu, the future queen shall be Amara of Umulechi. The city erupted. Drummers played like thunder. Women ululated until their voices cracked. Market stalls shut down for celebration. The girl with no shoes. The girl they once laughed at was now the crown. And Madame Obi, she did not scream. She did not beg. She simply disappeared. Faded like smoke after a fire has burned through everything. No one asked where she went. No one cared. Bitterness has no throne here. Only silence. But Amara, she didn't just become queen of a palace. She became a symbol for every girl who had ever been mocked for being too quiet, too plain, too strange. For every woman who had been torn down for being different, and still stood up anyway. She was not just royalty. She was a reminder that no one can steal your crown when it was built from fire, not gold. If you enjoyed this story, like the video, share it with someone who needs courage, and drop a comment below. Have you ever turned pain into power? And don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable African folktales. Because sometimes when they try to cut you down, they only reveal the strength they could never take.